The summer of 1943 marked a critical turning point in the Second World War. After the devastating defeats at Stalingrad and in North Africa, Adolf Hitler's Wehrmacht prepared for one final, decisive blow on the Eastern Front. The target was the Kursk salient, a massive bulge in Soviet lines stretching more than 200 kilometers across the plains of western Russia. Both sides knew that the coming battle would decide the fate of the Eastern Campaign, perhaps even the outcome of the entire war. For months, the German High Command planned Operation Citadel, the code name for a massive pincer assault designed to encircle and destroy the Red Army forces inside the salient. Hitler believed that by crushing the Soviets at Kursk, Germany could regain the initiative it had lost at Stalingrad. Every detail of the operation was meticulously studied. New tanks like the Tiger I and Panther D were introduced, and elite SS Panzer divisions were brought to the front. Yet beneath the confident exterior, the German war machine was strained. Fuel shortages, worn-out men, and production delays in the new tanks cast long shadows over their preparations. On the other side of the lines, the Soviets were not blind to German intentions. Thanks to an extensive intelligence network, including intercepted communications and reports from partisans, Joseph Stalin and his generals knew that a major German offensive was imminent. Instead of attacking first, they chose to absorb the blow. Under the supervision of Marshal Georgy Zhukov, the Red Army turned the Kursk region into the most heavily fortified area on Earth. Thousands of engineers and civilians labored day and night, laying millions of mines, digging anti-tank trenches, and building multiple defensive belts stretching deep into the countryside. Villages became strong points. Rivers were turned into barriers. Fields were sown not with crops, but with explosives. Entire tank corps were concealed beneath camouflage nets, waiting for the right moment to strike back. The Soviet plan was simple yet brutal. Let the Germans exhaust themselves against layer after layer of defenses, then counterattack with overwhelming force. By late June 1943, the signs of the impending battle were everywhere. In the German camps, tank engines roared as mechanics tested their machines. Pilots studied aerial maps under the dim glow of lanterns, and officers briefed their men on objectives that few would live to see completed. Soldiers wrote letters home, aware that the next sunrise could be their last. In the Soviet lines, the atmosphere was one of tense anticipation. Commanders rehearsed responses to every possible scenario, while infantrymen cleaned rifles and waited in their trenches. Every man could feel it. The air itself seemed to vibrate with expectation. The scale of the preparations was unprecedented. The Germans assembled nearly 3,000 tanks and assault guns, 2,000 aircraft, and over 900,000 men. The Soviets matched them with more than 5,000 tanks, 2,500 aircraft, and nearly 2 million troops. It was a concentration of firepower never before seen in human history. The world was about to witness the largest armored clash ever fought. Yet in the quiet before the storm, both sides hesitated. Hitler delayed the offensive repeatedly, hoping for more Panther tanks to arrive. Each delay gave the Soviets more time to dig in, strengthen their positions, and stockpile ammunition. Meanwhile, Allied landings in Sicily loomed on the horizon, threatening to draw German resources away from the Eastern Front. Inside Hitler's Wolf's Lair headquarters, tension mounted as his generals debated whether to proceed. Some, like Field Marshal Model, warned that the Red Army was now too strong. Others insisted that a decisive strike could still turn the tide. In the end, Hitler made his choice. Operation Citadel would begin in early July. As July approached, the rolling fields of Kursk were eerily calm. Farmers who had survived years of occupation and battle now watched as the land transformed into a fortress. Birds circled above freshly dug trenches, and the scent of oil and gunpowder drifted through the summer air. Both armies waited for orders that would unleash destruction on a scale the world had never seen. The soldiers could not know it then, but within days the plains of Kursk would become a blazing inferno of steel and fire, a place where thousands of tanks would clash, and where the dreams of a Nazi victory would finally begin to crumble. The calm before the storm was almost over. Engines rumbled in the distance, signaling that the greatest tank battle in history was about to begin. At dawn on July 5, 1943, the silence over the Kursk plains was shattered. The German artillery opened fire, unleashing a thunderous barrage that rolled across the front. Operation Citadel had begun. For the soldiers crouched in trenches, it felt as if the earth itself was splitting apart. Shells screamed overhead, and the first waves of German panzers began to move, dark silhouettes cutting through the early morning mist. The northern assault, led by Field Marshal Model's Ninth Army, struck southward toward the city of Aboyan. To the south, General Hoth's 4th Panzer Army advanced northward, aiming to close the pincer. Between them lay the Soviet defenses, layer after layer of minefields, barbed wire, and anti-tank traps manned by tens of thousands of Red Army soldiers who had sworn not to give an inch. The Germans relied on their newest weapons, the heavy Tiger I tanks, nearly invincible from the front, and the sleek Panther tanks, designed to outgun and outrun anything the Soviets could field. But the battlefield quickly revealed harsh realities. The Panthers, rushed into service, broke down in alarming numbers before even reaching the front line. Soviet artillery and minefields took a heavy toll on the advancing columns. Every kilometer gained came at a staggering price. From the air, the battle was no less ferocious. Over the fields of Belgorod and Prokhorovka, thousands of aircraft clashed in swirling dogfights. German Stukas dove through clouds of flak, targeting Soviet strongpoints, while Yak and La-5 fighters rose to meet them. The sky became a storm of smoke and fire. Pilots on both sides described it as chaos, no formation, no clear front, only survival. By the end of the first day, the Germans had advanced only a few miles. The Red Army's defensive belts were holding, though at terrible cost. Soviet soldiers fought from bunkers, foxholes, and burning trenches. Many units were wiped out entirely, but fresh reserves immediately filled their places. Behind them, Marshal Zhukov and General Rokossovsky coordinated a complex defense-in-depth strategy, ordering counterattacks wherever German breakthroughs threatened to form. For the men inside the tanks, the battle was a nightmare of heat and terror. Engines overheated, visibility was near zero, and every explosion could mean death. Crews fought not just the enemy, but exhaustion, dust, and fear. In some areas, tank duels took place at point-blank range, with vehicles colliding and burning together. Survivors later recalled the ground trembling under the weight of machines and the constant roar that drowned out every human sound. After 3 days of fighting, it became clear that the Grand German plan was faltering. The Red Army's defenses were too deep, their resistance too fierce. Yet Hitler refused to halt the attack. Believing that victory was still within reach, he ordered his panzer forces to press on toward Prokhorovka, where the largest armored clash in history was about to unfold. Operation Citadel had begun with confidence and precision. It was now turning into a battle of attrition, a grinding contest of endurance that neither side could afford to lose. The clash of steel had started, and the outcome would soon decide the fate of the Eastern Front. By July 12, 1943, the German offensive had reached its climax. After a week of brutal fighting, both armies converged near the small railway station of Prokhorovka, a name that would soon become legendary. It was here that the Red Army launched its counterstroke. An assault meant not just to halt the German advance, but to destroy it completely. At dawn, the fields around Prokhorovka were blanketed in dust and smoke. Over 800 Soviet tanks from the 5th Guards Tank Army, commanded by General Pavel Rotmistrov, surged forward against the elite 2 SS Panzer Corps. What followed was chaos, one of the largest armored clashes in human history. Tanks collided at close range, firing point-blank as visibility disappeared in clouds of dirt and flame. Engines roared, shells ricocheted, and entire units vanished within minutes. The Germans, positioned on higher ground, unleashed devastating fire with their Tigers and Panthers. But the Soviets pressed on relentlessly. Their T-34s, faster and more maneuverable, swarmed through the gaps, closing the distance to neutralize the enemy's range advantage. Crews fought and died often without even seeing their opponents. The plain near Prokhorovka became a sea of burning metal, littered with wrecks and the shattered remains of men and machines. By midday, the German advance had ground to a halt. Though the Soviets suffered enormous losses, their ferocity and numbers overwhelmed the attackers. Hitler's hopes of encircling the Kursk salient were crushed. Meanwhile, news arrived that Allied forces had landed in Sicily, threatening Germany's southern flank. With the situation deteriorating on all fronts, Hitler ordered Operation Citadel to be halted. But for the Red Army, the battle was far from over. Within days, they seized the initiative and began a series of counteroffensives. Operation Kutuzov in the north and Operation Rumiantsev in the south. Soviet forces pushed forward with relentless momentum, retaking Orel, Belgorod, and eventually the ruined city of Kharkov. The German army, once unstoppable, was now in retreat. The victory at Kursk marked a turning point in the war on the Eastern Front. Never again would Germany launch a large-scale offensive in the East. From this moment onward, the Red Army advanced steadily westward, pushing the Wehrmacht back toward Poland and ultimately Berlin. For the soldiers who survived Kursk, the memories remained vivid. The blinding flashes, the choking smoke, the endless roar of engines and guns. More than 2 million men had fought in the battle. Hundreds of thousands would never return home. The fields that once echoed with the sound of thunder now lay silent, covered with the wreckage of war. The Battle of Kursk had ended. The tide had turned. From the ashes of one of the greatest clashes in history, a new phase of the war began, one that would carry the Red Army all the way to the heart of Nazi Germany.